I'm Jack, Sam's brother, and we are here in our backyard where we also live with our other brother. And Sam wanted to give some advice about how to have an impact on the world. And since he couldn't interview himself, here I am. So, Sam, thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, to get started, I think one of the things that people talk a lot about is how to get things done once you're working on. But I know you spend a lot of time thinking about sort of what to work on. So, could you talk a little bit about how to pick what's important to work on?
Yeah, I think you want to look for the intersection of what you're good at, what you enjoy, and where you can create value for the world. And in my experience, if you don't find something at the intersection of those three, it's hard to really have an impact. I think most people kind of just fall into what they work on. They don't give it much thought, and there is benefit to that. Sometimes you actually have to just try stuff to figure out what you like. But I really do think it is worth upfront thought about what you're going to spend most of your waking time doing. So I think it's really good when people think about what they're good at, what they like, and kind of how they can create value for the world.
And sort of in addition to what people are working on, I know at Y Combinator you talk a lot about who people are working on things with.
Yeah.
How do you advise people to select sort of who they're working on things with?
This is really hard. Finding your tribe, finding the sort of people that you end up working with on and off for the rest of your career is really hard. I think I'll tell you some things I've learned, and I will admit that I don't have a perfect answer to this yet. But I think one thing is you should be willing to move. For whatever you're doing, there tend to be pockets of it around the world where there are similar people that are doing great work in whatever field you care about. And it's really worth trying to go be near them. And so, we get criticized sometimes at YC for having people move to the Bay Area, but bringing people together that are interested in this similar thing of startups, I think has been really valuable for a lot of people. I think another thing that I have learned is that whenever I've helped people for no immediate benefit and with no intention of ever getting a benefit at all, time and again in my career, it has really later benefited me a lot. So I think you at some point often get to a point in your career where you're limited by how many good people you know, and how many of those you can work with or get to do things that together. And so just helping a lot of people and spending a lot of time with a lot of people has benefited me, years after I've really helped someone for no reason. I get to invest in their startup and it goes on to be a huge success, or we're able to work on OpenAI together, any number of things. I think just trying to help a lot of people, and out of that seeing who is really impressive and who gets things done is helpful.
And in terms of how to actually get things done, so you've selected what to work on, who to work on it with, you think maybe you found your tribe, and then kind of now what? What are sort of the best ways to actually accomplish big things?
Well, there's a Charlie Rose quote on this that I've always loved, and I've since added one more element to it. But the quote is that the way things get done in the world are through a combination of focus and personal connection. And the additional point I would make, after having thought about it for a while, is that the third factor is self-belief. You really have to have a deep-seated personal conviction that this thing you're going to do that a lot of people say is really stupid is going to work and going to be important. But I think those three things, focus, personal connections, and self-belief, in my experience, are how things get done in the world.
So since you were, as long as, you've grown up, and certainly through your 20s and now, you've worked incredibly hard, and I know that a lot of the people around you have worked very hard. What's sort of the advice or the way that you think about your work-life balance in your 20s, and what do you recommend to people who want to do these things and also want to, experience their 20s?
Well, I don't think I work as hard as a lot of people. I think I do work pretty hard. But I'd say it's really, I think it's compound interest is a good metaphor here. If you work really hard at the beginning of your career, and you get a little bit better at what you do every day, every week, every year, and you learn more and you meet more people and you just get more done, there's a compound effect. And it's far better to put that time in at the beginning of your career than at the end, because if you do it at the beginning, you get to benefit from it, for the rest of the time you work. So, one thing I always try to do is meet every person I had time for, go to everything I could, and just spend a little bit more time trying to learn and get better at what I do. And I think that is really valuable. The beginning of your career, I think in terms of setting the trajectory that the rest of your career follows, is the most valuable time. And so obviously you don't want to work all the time because your 20s are your 20s. But I do think you want to work harder than most people think you should. And I think that if you do that, you tend to benefit from it later. Life is super unfair. Sometimes you also just get unlucky. And so all you can do is kind of maximize chances there. But I do think that working hard early in your career to get the leverage and the compounding effects is underrated and one of the most valuable pieces of advice that I never got.
And so going into that idea of these early years being particularly valuable and working very hard on things, how do you decide when you've worked on something long enough and it's time to call it quits, or when you've worked on it for 4 years and you're just about to have that breakthrough? How do you make that distinction?
Yeah, this is really hard. Knowing when to quit and knowing when to give up on something there's no perfect answer to that. But it's really challenging to even get that approximately correct. I think most people give up on things way too early. So the mistake that most people make is they try something, it does not immediately work. You see this particularly in young entrepreneurs. It does not immediately work. After 7 weeks, they say, you know what, I tried this thing, it's just not meant to be, and I have too many other projects, and so they immediately give up. And you kind of, the satirical version of this is people that are 23 and have started 14 startups. Because they give up on everyone before it could ever possibly be successful. These things are really hard. They take a very long time. There are a lot of critics. There are a lot of people who say this thing sucks. It's going to fail. It's really stupid. And then also there's like what at YC we call the trough of sorrow, where no one even bothers to say it sucks because no one cares at all. And that is at least as demotivating. Most of the founders that I have spent a lot of time with that have gone on to be super successful spent a very long time on their idea when a lot of other people would have given up. And either people said it sucks or people said nothing at all. And a framework that I have for when to give up and when to keep working is it should be an internal, not an external decision. If people aren't using it or if people are saying it's bad, that alone is not a reason to give up. You want to pay some attention to that. They might be right. But I think the best entrepreneurs I know, they make an internal decision about when to give up or when to keep working on something. It's basically when you have run out of ideas and something is not working, then it's a good time to stop.
And so into this idea that you need a long time to do anything important, what's the source of motivation for people? Like, what should people be looking to find to be inspired or to keep going on these ideas for a long period of time?
I think if you don't actually believe what you're doing is really important, and if you don't derive satisfaction from what you're doing, then you will not be able to sustain all of the bad things that happen in the incredibly long period of time that the bad things happen over. And so the only motivation that I have seen work for people over a long period of time is enjoyment in what they're doing and an intense belief that it matters, and ideally liking the people that they go to work with every day. But I think the reasons that a lot of people, and by the way, it's totally cool when people start off saying, well, I want to make money or I want to be famous. I think a lot of people start that way and they don't like to admit it. But pretty quickly, or at least in the first few years, I think a lot of people find a deeper mission for why they do what they do. And that drives them then for the rest of the time they work.
Have you noticed a change in what motivates you over the last, say, 10 or 12 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I am sort of only interested in things that I find sort of interesting and important. And early on, like a lot of other people, I think I was like, well, I want to make money. I want to, like be in the press or whatever else. And I wouldn't say that doesn't motivate me at all, but it's honestly not a big factor at this point.
Yeah.
I just sort of there's a set of things that I think are important, and I want to work on those. I think another point about motivation that people don't talk about enough is related to burnout. So I was told, and I thought for a long time, that you get burned out from working too hard. And at least in my own experience, what I found is that burnout actually comes from failing and things not working. Momentum is really energizing. The lack of momentum is super draining. And I find that I have infinite energy to work on things that I find interesting and that are working, and almost none to work on things that I either don't find interesting or aren't working. And so I think you see a lot of founders try something and fail and assume that they just can't work hard enough or don't have enough energy or passion or whatever. And that's actually not true. It's just that thing didn't work. And what you should do is shut that company down, go on vacation, and try again. And many people then find that, oh, actually, when I'm doing this thing that I like and that is working, I have a huge amount of energy and I can get a lot of stuff done. And so when you look at really successful people and say, how do they get all those things done? It's they have the benefit of momentum, and momentum is energizing. And the lack of momentum is really not energizing.